Well, as its relations with Washington cool over the war in Ukraine, Russia is also facing rising tensions with one of its old allies. Azerbaijan is accusing Russian police of killing two of its citizens. Their deaths have triggered yet another escalation in diplomatic tension between the two countries.
Azerbaijani Member of Parliament Rasim Musabekov has called on Baku to actively arm Ukraine against the backdrop of Russia's ongoing and aggressive energy war against Azerbaijan. The Member of Parliament noted that the Azerbaijani army still operates a significant amount of Soviet-era equipment, which is now being replaced with modern Turkish weaponry. In this context, Azerbaijan could transfer to Ukraine the Soviet hardware that is no longer needed by its armed forces, but continues to fight against Russian aggression. Rasim Musabekov believes there is no need to make public statements regarding the transfer of arms. After all, as is well known, Russia does not respond to the language of public declarations, but only to the language of actions. That is why, in his words, Azerbaijan must respond to the campaign Russia is now waging against its energy facilities not with statements or protests, but with real assistance to Ukraine. This statement by the Azerbaijani parliamentarian reflects growing irritation in Baku over the tactics that the Kremlin has chosen in its dealings with Azerbaijan, most likely after the catastrophe with the Azerbaijani passenger plane, when President Ilham Aliyev called on the Russian side to apologize for the tragedy caused by a strike from a Russian air defense system. Baku expected a much more adequate response, but the reaction turned out to be quite different. As we can see, in Russia, Azerbaijan's aspiration to defend its own sovereignty is perceived almost as an insult. Moreover, Moscow is not limiting itself to statements alone, but is taking concrete steps intended to demonstrate its unwillingness to make any concessions. Russia's energy war against Azerbaijan is the clearest example of how Moscow plans to build relations with former Soviet republics in the future, and of the lessons it has drawn from years of the Russian-Ukrainian war. In my view, the conclusion is obvious and clear to everyone. It is precisely the use of force that is meant to teach Russia's neighbors how they should build their relations with Moscow. In addition to the recent and serious strikes on Azerbaijani oil depots located in Ukraine and owned by the well-known company SOCAR, we now also have the critical situation with the Kremenchuk oil refinery, which dramatically unfolded last night. As is known, this refinery, which was attacked by Russian Shahed drones, also processed Azerbaijani oil, and therefore, the strike on the Kremenchuk refinery can quite legitimately be seen as part of the same pattern as the recent attacks on the oil depot in the Odessa region. At the same time, Russia continues attacks on Azerbaijanis living in the Russian Federation, or on Russian citizens of Azerbaijani origin. In parallel with the strikes on Azerbaijani energy infrastructure in Ukraine, it also became known about the decision to strip one of the leaders of the Azerbaijani diaspora in Russia of his Russian citizenship. This is an absolutely unprecedented move that once again highlights a Russian passport is by no means a guarantee against persecution. Moreover, it can be revoked if relations between the two countries deteriorate. And it is quite clear that this is only the first wave of serious repressions carried out against businesses controlled by Azerbaijani citizens in Russia, or by Russian citizens of Azerbaijani descent. Vladimir Putin is in no hurry to make any definitive statements that would clearly indicate his stance toward Baku's current policy. Moscow reacted calmly to the recent visit of Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan to Washington, as well as to their agreement on a transport corridor intended to connect Azerbaijan with Nakhchivan and further with the Republic of Turkey, at least in terms of official statements. However, when it comes to their true and hidden intentions, we can speak of a fully comprehensive program of decisive and forceful actions. Therefore, it is quite likely that the Azerbaijani parliamentarian is right when he says that Azerbaijan can respond to Russia's actions with corresponding steps. After all, Azerbaijan should be interested in protecting its own energy assets on Ukrainian territory, in safeguarding its own business, and in demonstrating its ability to defend its sovereignty. Of course, this will not change Russian policy, but on the other hand, it may restrain the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, from further aggressive actions against Baku. We have already seen that in the Kremlin, the language of negotiations and diplomacy is mostly perceived as a sign of weakness and readiness to seek compromises on Russian terms. We have also seen that the Russian leadership uses any negotiation process as a tool of pressure and a means to obtain not only political, but also economic advantages. But when it turns out that a certain country is ready not only to make statements and conduct negotiations, but also to respond to Russia in its own political language, the attitude towards such a state may change significantly. Ultimately, the president of Russia has not been able to convince his long-standing political partner, the President of the Republic of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, to stop supplying weapons to Ukraine. He has also failed to force him to abandon the clear recognition of Ukraine's territorial integrity and its status regarding the occupied and annexed Crimea. And here a rather simple question arises. Why should we assume that if one of the former Soviet republics, for example Azerbaijan, decides to supply weapons to Ukraine, this would provoke some new reaction from the Russian Federation? After all, it is obvious that if Moscow decides to launch a military operation against Azerbaijan, no arms deliveries will influence this decision, since Azerbaijan is protected primarily by its relations with Ankara, as well as by its new relations with Washington and the agreement reached between the President of Azerbaijan and the Prime Minister of Armenia. For now, in Baku, they are more likely to be sending signals to Moscow than making concrete decisions. But it is clear that if Russia does not stop and continues its energy war against Azerbaijan, sooner or later, Azerbaijani weapons will end up in the arsenal of the Ukrainian army.